Slot hier im Zelt. Wer von den anwesenden Hackern hat denn heute schon Koffein?
Okay, welcome to this translation of this talk about caffeine.
Vielleicht 2 Handvoll, eigentlich alle. Wenn ich überrascht,
And
ich glaube, Koffein
who here in the audience has consumed any caffeine today? Basically everyone in the audience raised their hands. So as caffeine is such an integral part of being a hacker, I'm very happy to announce the next speaker who will talk about everything you always wanted to know about caffeine, or maybe didn't want to know.
Hallo liebe Menschen, danke,
Hello
dass ihr
and
hier seid,
welcome.
in diesem Zelt sitzt, statt euch an den See zu setzen.
I'm glad you're here in this tent and not at the lake. I'm happy to be talking about caffeine today, and I'm interested in that, and I'm consuming a lot of caffeine myself, so I was thinking this might be a very interesting topic, which is also interesting to a lot of you. So while I was preparing for this talk, I looked at my own caffeine consumption, and on the bottom you see the date, and on the left side you see the amount of caffeine I was taking in. And right now that might not mean a lot to you, but we can see later what this means actually. So here we are seeing what types of caffeine I was consuming, and I was consuming about 10 liters of caffeine, and that's around 2,000 milligrams of caffeine, and my favorite drink was Miu Miu Mate Ginger. And so I brought a Flora Mate with me, which I don't have in this graph, but I can enjoy it now. So let's first of all look at the molecule itself. You can see it here. It's cute and it's not very complicated. So in its original form, it's not very interesting actually. And if you look at it, it looks a lot like powdered sugar, and I think all of you know how this looks like. And the first extrapolated caffeine was actually from coffee beans, and Goethe was interested what is the stimulating thing coming out of coffee, and he extrapolated this molecule and was researching on this. And tein, you might have heard about this, is basically the same thing as caffeine. Sometimes you have this differentiated because of the things it's coming out of, but the official name, chemistry name here is 1,3,7-trimethyl 3,7-dihydro-1-H-purine-2,6-dione. I don't know this official name by heart. I just call it caffeine. If you
Ja, die am häufigsten bekannte Wirkung des Koffeins ist, dass sie uns wach macht. Und
so if you look at what it is doing and what the effects are, the most well-known effect is that it makes us awake. And that's what we all use it for mostly. And so the lethal dose of caffeine is 10 grams, and that sounds like a lot, and in your daily consumptions you won't really hit this dose. So let's look at the effects caffeine has. And we all drink it because we want to be happy and energized and start our days this way. And the main effect of caffeine is
darauf gehen wir gleich noch ein. Aber die
So the main effective method, how it works, is it goes to the receptor of adenosine in your brain, and it can raise your blood pressure and your heart rate. It can make it easier to breathe for you, and it can make you more effective. It can increase your concentration. It can increase your level of being awake. So let's look at how it actually works. In our brain, all of us have these synapses. The synapses are basically how the body regulates what we need at each point and how it works. Caffeine basically goes where adenosine usually goes. Adenosine we have in our body. It's something that develops from ATP, adenosine triphosphate, and whenever we use something, we use energy in our body, what happens is that ATP is getting split up into adenosine, among others. And that kind of leads to me getting tired when I have a lot of adenosine. Like the cat here. The adenosine makes sure that our body doesn't split out any more adrenaline, and it makes us tired. So it's basically the opposite of caffeine. Okay. The caffeine basically goes to the transmitter, but instead of adenosine, it doesn't do anything at this point. So all of these things that happen when you're tired don't happen. So instead, we become more awake, we become more active, we become happy.
Kommt dann auch noch ein bisschen darauf an, wie genau.
And that also, the caffeine also works differently depending on how our body works. For older people, caffeine works more because it goes to the proteins in your blood, and older people have less proteins, whereas someone who's smoking, they will eliminate the caffeine more quickly, because the enzymes that are eliminating the caffeine are higher concentrated in people who are smoking. And if you use contraception, hormonal contraception, or are pregnant, then it's completely the opposite. So your elimination is smaller. It's also interesting that if you have ADHD, you might have a paradox effect of caffeine. So and it was something that I found on the internet, but I've also found some research that would suggest this, because ADHD also works on the neurotransmitters like adrenaline. So if we have something that makes sure, so if with ADHD you have something that leads to dopamine being more released, then this caffeine could also have a different effect. So it's possible that it is, but there's not really a lot of evidence. So if we consume too much caffeine, then we kind of get side effects. Now at night, when I drink a mate, I might not be able to sleep. Now, if I actually drink too much, we can become nervous, we can not be able to sleep, we can sweat a lot, we can be kind of nervous, our heart rate quickens. And everything of that is like what happens when we're too awake. So our body kind of feels we have too much energy, and this energy needs to go somewhere. So maybe we even get panic attacks. But the most serious side effect, long-standing side effect, is actually that you get a tolerance. So you get used to it, and your body will react if you don't give him the caffeine. So let's talk about the mass of caffeine. So what's much caffeine? What's little caffeine? So actually the Federal Institute for Risk Taking has some guidelines for adults. They will suggest that you should not take more than 200 milligrams of caffeine at one time, which is 2 club mates, and you shouldn't take more than 400 milligrams caffeine per day, so not more than 5.7 milligram per kg body weight. If you're underage, because caffeine works in the central nervous system, you should only take 3 milligrams per 1 kg body weight per day, actually. This is quite interesting for kids who are about 33 kg heavy, they can actually take 1 mate per day. And if you're pregnant, you should take about half of other adults.
Also höchstens.
So at most, obviously.
Das Kind in dem Fall nicht irgendwelche gesundheitlichen
So that the child won't have any problems.
200 Milligramm pro Tag.
In general, it's like 200 milligrams per day, which I think is quite a lot.
Gerne über schwangere Personen, die Koffein zu sich führen, aufgeregt wird.
Because there's a lot of outrage when pregnant people are drinking caffeine, but actually it's their decision, right?
Eben kurz angesprochen.
Okay.
Koffein langfristig
Caffeine
sorgt dafür, dass sich
in the long term
Hirn neue Synapsen
will make new synapses
Unser Körper
for
ist,
adenosine.
ein empfindliches Gleichgewicht und
There's like
komplex.
our body is in balance usually.
Irgendwie wird das ganze Adenosin nicht abgebaut.
So after a while,
Dementsprechend neue Synapsen. Das heißt,
when you take more
wenn
caffeine,
wir mehr Koffein trinken,
you will get
oder
more
warten, bis
synapses.
das Adenosin sich abgebaut hat. Also kein
So
Koffein
if we
wegnehmen.
want
Und schlafen, viel schlafen.
if we want to kind of like stay the same, we need to take more caffeine suddenly, or not take any caffeine and then wait for the adenosine to get eliminated and sleep basically. So what will happen when we don't drink any caffeine? We will actually become tired. Now many people, including me, thinks that caffeine in the morning is actually great. Who of you drank caffeine within the first hour of getting up today?
Leider werden wir nicht schläfrig und dann super fit wie diese Katze.
Unfortunately, we don't become tired and then very fit like this cat. Instead, we have another hormone in our body, cortisol.
Wenn wir aufstehen, innerhalb der
Cortisol in the morning
quasi sein Peak. Das heißt,
has its peak like 1 hour after we get up.
nicht einen draufsetzen. Es wäre super voll.
There's this peak and we're suddenly awake. Then
Unser Körper, da wird
we can't improve this situation. So, but if we do this in the long term, then in the morning, our body will think, well, I won't need to actually produce this cortisol. So that leads to our body basically expecting us to drink caffeine.
Deswegen ist
So
bis nach einer Stunde nach
you
dem
should
Aufstehen
not
nicht
take
die beste
caffeine
Idee.
until an hour after you've gotten up.
Zwischen 8 und 10 Uhr mit drin stehen.
Here I say
Dabei wird
between
eben
8
von
and
8 Uhr
9 a.m. and this kind of assumes that you get up at 8 a.m.
Wer heute
Who of you
oder davor
got up at 8 or a.m. or earlier today? Oh, quite a lot actually. Quite surprising.
Respekt an euch.
Respect.
Jedenfalls haben wir noch
Okay, anyway.
12 und 13 Uhr einen Koffeinpeak
Between 12 and
Cortisolpeak, Entschuldigung.
13,
Koffeinpeak
between
können wir
12
auch haben, aber es ist nicht die beste
And 1
Idee.
p.m. we also have a cortisol peak.
Zwischen 17:30 und
And
18:30.
between
Das heißt, wenn ihr
5:30 and
Mate dabei habt,
6:30
trinkt
p.m.
jetzt.
So if you have mate with you, please drink it now.
So, angenommen, wir sind jetzt an dem Punkt, an dem wir
So,
Koffein mehr zu uns nehmen wollen.
Let's assume we are at the point where we don't
Dann
want
stehen wir vielleicht
to consume caffeine any longer, and then we're standing in front of our mate and are kind of sad, and maybe we want to take it, but maybe if we don't do it, we are actually in withdrawal, which is the minimum of 12 hours, and it can be up to 9 days. Usually it's around 2 days, and it leads to headaches, and we're tired, we lose energy, we are moody, we might not be in the happiest at that point in time. Possibly we also have an increase in appetite, which is because caffeine is making us energized, and this is going down if we stop taking it. And you can also have trouble sleeping, which is kind of surprising. There is a study from 2003 which describes all the effects which happen if you stop taking caffeine, and there was also a note on nightmares actually. And there's also this funny website on the internet where you can check your dose for caffeine, which is from the official Bundeszentrum for an official German institution which is trying to tell us what is healthy for you and what is not. So I clicked around on this web page, and you can select how much caffeine you are taking and what's your age and your body weight and the time span where you drank it and whether you drank it all at once or throughout the day. And you can choose a couple of drinks here. For example, black tea, green tea, coffee, espresso, chocolate, which you eat. So I clicked around there a bit and I was like, what is happening here? What is it calculating? And I got a lot of different results here, so I was kind of interested, and I looked at the source code and found JavaScript. So that's kind of interesting, because it's kind of inconsistent, the code. So, because the numbers of how much caffeine is in there, there is sometimes a concentration per 100 milliliters,
Milligramm pro 100 milliliter,
which is milligram per 100 milliliters, and in other cases it's per cup, which I find kind of weird, because a cup is not a defined unit, so it's not really clear how much it actually is. So also it does include whether a person is above or under 18, so there is different variations in the calculation. I'm sorry I didn't format the code here correctly. If you're very interested in it, you can look at the code yourself. It's not very nice. And also there's a randomization of the responses. So if you're on the edge, you can get a note saying attention, or this is at the edge. So it's kind of funny actually. But also, as this website is talking about, sometimes it can be too much caffeine. So let's talk about the daily dose of caffeine, which is far away from the 400 milligrams we were talking about earlier, which is 10 whole grams. So the question here becomes, where is caffeine in the things we consume? So if I look at this Flora Mate, that's around 100 milligrams of caffeine, so that would be a lot of Flora Mate. So I went to my hackspace and looked at the fridge, and I looked at the Mate fridge, and we have also drinks like beer, because that's like a basic thing we also have, and we also have drinks without caffeine. And so I started looking at what kinds of drinks we have there, and in our storage we have 137 liters of mate, and I was looking at how much caffeine is in the different types of mate, and it's 27.65 grams of caffeine. So and then I also looked at the fridge, which is 28 liters of mate, which concludes to 5.78 grams of caffeine. So in total that's 165 liters of mate and 33.43 grams of caffeine. So that would be 55 liters of mate for a lethal dose of caffeine. That would be a lot to drink. The body will shut this down, not just because of the caffeine, but for a lot of other reasons. So getting an overdose of caffeine on accident is super difficult. And so another question is, where else do we find caffeine? Because like obviously we can drink mate and we can drink coffee, but are there other stuff like foods we consume which include caffeine? And I walked around my flat and saw what I could find, and I, for example, found chocolate, where you might be surprised to find caffeine. So here we have a list of stuff you might usually consume where you find caffeine. So the thing I personally find most interesting is chocolate, but to get to these numbers I can actually drink a lot of mate. I'm more happy to drink a Flora Mate than eat 5 bars of milk chocolate. even though that would also be nice. But
Kaffee ist nochmal so ein kleiner Sonderfall.
coffee is kind of a special case.
Es kommt immer so ein bisschen darauf an, wie stark der Kaffee
It
gemacht
depends on how strong the coffee
Letztes
is.
Jahr auf der GPN
Last
war
year
mit
at
anderen Menschen am
GPN,
Kaffee machen und wir hatten
which is
eine
another hacker
Kaffeemaschine und
event,
haben diesen Kaffeefilter
We
bis
had
unten
a
hingefüllt.
coffee
Das
machine
geht gerade,
and
dass die
we filled
Kaffeemaschine
it up
gerade
to
noch
the
zuging.
limit,
Das
so
hatte da
it
vermutlich
barely
ein bisschen mehr
closed. So that was
Andere
maybe
Kaffee
a
ein bisschen
bit more
weniger haben, wenn man
caffeine,
mit weniger
but
Koffein
in
zusetzt,
other
wenn
cases,
man ihn mit
if you
weniger
put less
Kaffeepulver
coffee
zubereitet.
in your coffee, so less coffee pulver
Aber
in
gesetzlich
your
gesehen gibt's da
coffee,
auch
then it might be a bit weaker. But
14 Milligramm auf
just
100
looking at the laws, there are also
Milliliter
limits.
Angabe.
So there is this limit of 15 milligrams per 100 milliliters. And there is this warning which is saying not for children or pregnant people. And this is because of the laws which are telling the producers to put this label on their products. And a lot of companies actually put this label on drinks where they don't need to, but they are doing it anyways. And for energy drinks, there's actually a different limit than for coffee. And for energy drinks, it's a maximum of 32 milliliters per 100 milliliters. And there is also special caffeinated products, so food which would not include caffeine on its own, or stuff which have additionally added caffeine, for example, this hodgepodge, but also jellies or specially caffeinated chocolate, which has more caffeine than regular chocolate. There's chewing gums, there's caffeine tablets actually.
Gerade noch so ein bisschen dabei, Chemie zu studieren.
I'm actually studying chemistry.
Tabletten und Rotwein.
One person there is eating caffeine tablets with red wine.
Kaffee ein bisschen übertreiben.
But especially with caffeine tablets and coffee, you can actually go to your limits a little bit. It's not quite lethal most of the time, but it can become dangerous.
Ich würde mal sagen, höchstens 80 Milligramm auf 100 Milliliter.
So a regular coffee is like 80 milligrams per 100 milliliters, but some coffee beans are actually stronger in caffeine than just regular ones.
Auf die 85 Milligramm
where you can easily get to 58 milligrams per 100 milliliters, which isn't a ton, but like it's getting more. And there is this Black Insomnia coffee, which is the strongest coffee I could find, which is 311 milligrams per 100 milliliters. And it was a bit confusing to find this out, because a lot of the producers are saying this amount of caffeine per cup, and as I just talked about earlier, a cup is not the best unit of measurement, because there is tiny cups and small cups, so that can mean a lot of things if you put this measurements by cup. And at some point I found out a cup is 177 milliliters, which is from the US, because they don't like metric measuring systems. And another thing you might have heard about is caffeine against hair loss, which is like, hey, caffeine can help my body, but can it also help my hair? And can my hair grow stronger or better or faster? Or is there any kind of cool effect? And there's actually studies on this, which have a positive effect in the laboratory, which is for a specific case for hair loss, which is due to genetics, and for people who have this special genetic case, they mix testosterone and caffeine and put the substance in there, and so they put the hair in there for 5 days, and I don't think most of us actually wash their hair for 5 whole days. And in the UK,
dass es dadurch weniger
there is a shampoo which has been limited to advertise. They were advertising for this to reduce hair loss, but like they were limited to do this advertising because there's not really a scientific proof here.
Wie viel Koffein?
And then I was also asking myself, how much caffeine do we consume worldwide? And I found a lot of stats about coffee.
Habe mir das angeschaut.
So I specifically looked at these stats about coffee, which I could find. So I found out in Finland people consume a lot of coffee, and a lot of Scandinavian countries are doing quite well. Germany is kind of in the middle here.
Prognose, wie sie für das Jahr 2007 war. 2017. Sorry.
For 2017, but it's not the stats, but like
Grund haben, warum das so toll ist. In Finnland und Schweden gibt es Fika.
Actually.
Das ist so eine Art von Kaffeepause. Also es ist nicht nur eine Kaffeepause.
And in Finland there is this concept of fika, which is kind of a coffee break, but it's like not just a coffee break we know, which is just like taking a coffee and like chilling, but it's also a form of socializing. So due to this fika, this is a reason why there's this high consume of coffee in the Scandinavian countries. In Iceland, it's apparently the national drink, but I didn't really find stats on this. And apparently, coffee is not only known on our planet, but also on the USS Voyager, where the captain is flying to different kinds of planets to find more coffee. And I was like, yeah, well, coffee is all right, but I myself, I don't consume a lot of coffee, so I prefer mate. And how is the consumption for mate worldwide? So mate, the original substance is from South America, but the iced tea we have here is originating in Germany, which was known as Sektbronte, which is produced by the brewery Loscher.
Besichtigung der Mate-Brauerei.
And we could actually visit the Mate brewery at the International Club Mate Party. And this brewery on their website is saying they export to 75 companies worldwide to Madagascar and China. So maybe Club Mate is being exported worldwide, and like I think this is mostly specific for Club Mate.
Gerade sehr viel über Mengen von Koffein. Wie können wir das überhaupt messen?
I'm currently talking a lot about how much caffeine and how can we measure this? And it would be kind of cool to have some sort of fluid or something else that would allow us to find out how much caffeine is in there. So like a litmus test basically. That would be amazing. But unfortunately it's not that easy. There is a Murexit test,
mit der ist es möglich,
which allows us to find caffeine basically, but unfortunately we can also find other stuff like urea.
Aus dem Bereich der Harnsäure.
And it was found to find urea actually. So if you look for if you use this test, then you can actually find urea in your urine. But unfortunately, it's not very easy to actually carry it out because you need very specific chemicals, and then it becomes violet once you find it. And then we also don't know what is the limit for finding it. So maybe we can't even find our caffeine. So that would be an easy solution. But how do all of the producers find out how much caffeine is in there? So the good answer is there is a possibility, but it's not very easy. There is a lab
Chromatographie.
HPLC, which is like a high-power liquid chromatograph, which
sehr, sehr viel Arbeit abnimmt. Es ist ein
which allows a lot of chemists to not have to work as much. Basically, I put some stuff in there and then just easily, just very basic. Sorry, I haven't found a picture of a more recent OS. I've already stood in front of this device at university, and I think I kind of just tried to forget what kind of OS there was. So yeah, because those devices are very expensive, they just use whatever OS works with this software. So basically what this does is it separates stuff. And there's an experiment that schools like to do. So we use a filter paper and put a hole in there, and then kind of allow this paper to be separated into its pen to be separated into its constituting elements. And this is the same thing we do with this HPLC. We have one matter and we modify it a little bit. So in order to do that, we use different solutions, and one of them is a calibrating solution. And because for this calibrating solution, we actually know the concentration of whatever active ingredient we want to test for. And this is what we use for our internal standard. This is, so this internal standard is something that is similar to the stuff that we want to analyze, which allows us to make sure that we don't make as many mistakes, basically. And if anything in this internal standard changes, then we know that our actual stuff is also probably changing. So if we use something that is similar to the caffeine, then we have suddenly done this with this calibration solution, at which point we have this solution of whatever with caffeine, and then this allows us to separate this solution into different smaller solutions, and sometimes we can use different methods as well, where molecules are split apart, and then you can look what is actually in these molecules, and it's actually quite a complicated topic, but the idea is we separate this into different molecules, and then we are able to see what is in there. Okay, so this was it. I hope you've learned something about caffeine. I'll upload these slides later. So if you have any questions, just ask them right now. Thank you for your attention.
Alles klar.
Okay.
Vielen Dank soweit, Lea.
Thank you, Lea.
Etwa 13 Minuten Zeit.
We have about 13 minutes for questions and answers. So if you have questions, just head up to the microphones. There's one on the left and one on the right. And we'll be able to answer your questions, or Lea will be able to answer your questions. There's no questions, apparently?
Als hätte der Vortrag bereits alle Fragen beantwortet.
Okay, wenn wir noch Zeit haben. Was ist eure Lieblingsmate-Sorte?
Okay, if we still have time, what's your favorite Mate? What's your favorite Mate?
Mal ganz kurz, also es gibt ja eigentlich nur zwei auf dem Kongress. Wer mag denn Flora Power lieber? Mal kurz Hand hoch.
Who prefers Flora Power? Hands are shown. Who prefers Club Mate?
Das ist relativ gleich.
It's roughly unanimous. Maybe a little more Flora Power. Who prefers another kind of Mate?
Ich sehe schon, wir müssen irgendwie an der Mate-Pluralität auf den Chaos-Veranstaltungen arbeiten.
Need to have more different Mate.
Wir haben noch eine Frage gefunden, bitteschön.
We do have a question now.
Hi. Es gibt immer das Gerücht, ich habe noch nie
There's a rumor
Dass man, wenn man
that
irgendwie nur eine Woche oder so kein Koffein
if you don't
trinkt,
drink
gar keins, dass man
caffeine
diese Toleranzgeschichte
for
wieder
a week,
auf Null hat, oder vielleicht waren es auch 2
then
Wochen
your
oder- also eine relativ
tolerance
kurze
will go
Zeit,
down
dass du
to
das
zero. So in a very, very short time.
Relativ kurze Zeit ist.
I can imagine that it's a very short time because
innerhalb von 2 Tagen durch ist. Also
most of
innerhalb von
these
2 Tagen
withdrawal
geht's dann zum Beispiel
symptoms
hoffentlich
are
auch mit diese Kopfschmerzen. Also
done
kann
within 2
natürlich
days.
auch noch länger dauern. Diese 2 Tage sind
Of
keine
course,
festen
sometimes
Tage,
it can
aber
take a little longer,
normalerweise
but usually it's only
nach
2
9
weeks.
Tagen durch. Also
So
gehe ich
at,
zumindest auch mal
after
davon
9
aus,
days
dass
at
die
most,
Geschichte
your
spätestens
withdrawal
9
is done.
Tagen durch ist
So I would
mit,
assume that
dieser
even your tolerance will be done after 9 days.
Also ja, diese Entzugserscheinungen
Okay.
sind dann weg, aber die Frage wäre, du hast ja gesagt, es bilden sich dann noch mehr Nervenzellen und Synapsen.
Yes, the withdrawal symptoms are done, but the synapses are. What about the synapses that have
gerne jemand anderes was dazu sagen, aber meine Idee ist es, also diese Synapsen
appeared?
bilden sich
Well,
ja
yeah, of
auch
course, someone
mehr
else
oder
can say
weniger
something,
vergleichsweise
but
schnell.
maybe
Falls irgendjemand
my
anderes
idea
eine
is
Liste
that
hat, könnt ihr auch
these
gerne was
synapses
dazu
are
sagen.
kind of appearing very quickly, so they might be able to disappear very quickly as well.
Sieht nicht so aus. Vielleicht
Okay, doesn't look like
im
it.
nächsten Kongress
Maybe next Congress this will follow up.
Wie gesagt, ich bin nicht der Weisheit letzter Schluss. Wenn ihr irgendetwas findet, womit ihr mich über Koffein genauer informieren könnt, bitte her damit. Also ihr könnt mir auch sehr gerne Nachrichten über Koffein schreiben, wenn ihr das möchtet.
Like, I'm not the only expert here. If you have any more information about caffeine and you want to
Ich habe zu danken.
inform me about this, just send me a message. Thank you, Leah, for this talk. We did a quick